You're in the information age, but facts are in short supply. Reject the noise, ask bold questions, and pursue the truth with FBI whistleblowers and founding suspendables Garrett O'Boyle and Steve Friend. This is the American Radicals Podcast.
It is the American Radicals Podcast on a Thursday morning, 10:30 Eastern Time, coming to you live on rumble.com/amradpod. If you haven't already, guys, make sure that you give us a nice thumbs up and follow the channel. If you want to subscribe, we appreciate it, and we will not stop you. And tell a friend or 12 about the program. You can also listen to us on iTunes and Spotify and iHeart, all of those audio streaming platforms, which we drop the episodes on every Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, 10:30 Eastern Time. Happy 4th of July Eve, guys. I know it's sort of a disruptive week here. It's actually kind of nice because 4th of July is falling on Friday, which means that so many people are getting that nice, clean 3-day weekend. But that's tomorrow. So you're going to have to stick with us through this program. It's going to be sort of a July 4th theme, but a very American Radicals Podcast form of that, because we're talking about a very specific element of the Declaration of the Independence, which is what July 4th is all about today, because we're talking about insufferable evil. It's a very specific line that I think I talked about maybe last year on July 4th, or maybe sometime around there. I think July 4th last year we did a Gettysburg themed show, so maybe didn't get into it, but I know we've talked about it before. Rose Lopez will have to go back to the archives. And good luck, Rose, because it's 232 episodes today. But today, we're going to be talking about the insufferable evil. It will just be me. Garrett's gotten an early start on July 4th. And I want to pull out this specific quote. Prudence, indeed, will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes. And accordingly, all experience hath shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. And that sounds really fancy and complicated and intellectual, but it basically means that at our core, most people will just roll their eyes and go along with the status quo, even though we know it sucks. Just as an example, you go sit down in the restaurant, you take the wife out, you finally got a babysitter, it's time to have a nice night on the town, it's date night, and you sit down and you order your steak, and you ordered it to be medium rare, and it comes out medium well. Are you really going to throw a flag? Are you going to send it back to the kitchen? Are you going to risk making the chef angry and having somebody spit in your food? Are you just going to suffer it? I mean, it's really not that big of a party foul. It is our nature to just go along, and the question becomes like, how much are you willing to suffer? Unfortunately, so many people are willing to let their kids be taught LGBTQ rainbow kamikaze madness because they just don't want to have the static and go to the school board and read the curriculum there so that it gets pulled off of the shelves. How far are you willing to go? And unfortunately, too many people are willing to sit around and allow things to go way too far. I mean, after all, we had a Tea Party because they jacked the tax on tea up a couple of percentage points. It's a little bit different now in 2025 America. So I'm going to give some examples here of how far are we willing to go? What sort of insufferable evils are out there in the relatively recent history, and play them out there as we go into this July 4th weekend to sort of mull around. What are you willing to put up with? Broken promises at the FBI, illegal alien invasion. The totals are in. The damage has been actually calculated, and it is ugly. Racial equity when it comes to organ transplants. Foreign aid is still going. Judges are protecting assaulters when they are going after people who are praying outside of abortion clinics, baby kill mills. And New York City communism, we have to highlight it. I know I don't care too much about it, but it is worth sort of as a meta discussion, because they're willing to lie very clearly about grocery stores and about driver's license issuances to people who can't drive. So we're going to get to all of that, but let's begin with the FBI, because there was a recent breaking news from multiple sources, but we'll go to the Washington Post because democracy dies in darkness. The Trump administration is going to keep the FBI headquarters in Washington, D.C., upending its planned move because they were going to move it out to Greenbelt, Maryland. But now we're going to keep the headquarters for the premier preeminent law enforcement agency for the country in the swamp because we have to, for reasons. The Trump administration announced plans to move headquarters from the Hoover Building to the Ronald Reagan Building and International Trade Center 3 blocks west. So we're going 3 blocks total, not getting it out of the swamp, keeping it there. And that's going to be reversing decades of planning to relocate the entire agency to the suburbs out in Maryland or Virginia. And they were fighting over that. The plan would headquarter the FBI inside a building that was home to the USAID, which has now been shuttered. And we'll get to that in a little bit. And it currently houses Customs and Border Protection and some private tenants with a food court so that it's good for the people that are working there. They can go and get their salads at lunch. The Reagan Building is intended to be the FBI's permanent home. So it's not temporary. This isn't just we're going to have a holding pattern here until we're able to figure out where we're going to put the FBI headquarters building. Well, can we find a better location outside of Greenbelt, Maryland, or somewhere in Northern Virginia? Are we going to put it down in Huntsville, Alabama? Are we going to put it in the middle of the country? No, we're going to keep it there permanently. And the plan is to have 3,000 to 4,000 people there. Now, a couple of different elements of this are interesting. This decision united leaders in Maryland and Virginia in opposition, not because they want to get that headquarters out of the swamp to serve the American people, but because they want that good, sweet government money that's going to create government jobs to build the new headquarters. And then also because government employees will move close to the headquarters, so they're going to wind up getting voters and tax base moved to their respective cities. It's also going to put the FBI headquarters right next to the DOJ. And here in the Washington Post, because democracy dies in darkness, they say that that's actually a good thing because right now, leaders and their counterparts at the DOJ meet in a secure facility at the DOJ to review the latest national security threats. We're back to the discussion we've had multiple times. That's not your job if you're a leader of the FBI. You are 15 derivatives, if you're the director, away from the agent who was working that case. Your job, if you're the director, is to cast the vision, to move the priorities out to what the president wants, to what the American people want. You're the outsider, you've come in, you want to set a strategy. If you're the deputy director, you want to implement the director's vision because you're supposed to be more intimately familiar with the machinations. You can move the chess pieces around the board, redirect resources. It is not your job to be sitting in meetings on a daily basis with your counterparts at the DOJ to discuss the highest, most high priority national security cases that are going on. Your job is to allow the professionals, the trained professionals, the people who have matriculated through a training and are experienced and are going to be assigned the high priority cases. It's not going to be some boot rookie agent. It's going to be an experienced guy or gal working that case. You do not need to be briefed up on that every single day. But apparently, according to the Washington Post, that is still going on, and it's not limited to the leadership at the FBI. I wanted to bring up something else. And there was an interview that Kash Patel did where he talked about moving and shuttering the Hoover Building. He wanted to turn it into a museum of the deep state. And I'm not going to take him at his word of that. I mean, that's hyperbole. That's heated rhetoric. That's sort of, though, casts a vision. There was a subsequent remark that he made, though. He said that there was only about 20 people in a skiff necessary to run the FBI. Well, here, we're moving to the Reagan Building with 3,000 to 4,000. So I guess he was off by order of magnitude or two, double that. And 4,000 people, not 20, 4,000, according to leadership at the FBI, are going to be necessary. Now, along the lines that we're talking about the current director of the FBI, this is away from the headquarters matter, but I do think it's important because this is a blast from the past. This is Director Kash Patel in a sit down with Brett Baer at the Quantico facility. And I want to bring this back up to have another discussion here as we're talking about some insufferable evils. And evils may be a loaded term, but just some violations, some things that are just rubbing me and others like me the wrong way. Here's Kash Patel talking to Brett Baier on Fox News.
Former FBI Director Chris Wray eventually admitted to Congress there were 26 FBI confidential human sources in around the Capitol January 6th, but not actual agents.
Are you thinking of selling your home in the daytime?
Of course. We get an ad. Let me bring that down, guys, and plug it down. This is the problem of being a live streaming podcaster here, and I'll have to see if I can recapture it, but it's probably not worth it. The remark he makes there that I think is important, and he does it subsequently, is that the FBI is going to turn over this information. He says that Christopher Wray, when he was asked about it in front of Congress, he presented a very government speak type of answer. When you're the director, you're supposed to have that information and you're supposed to answer that question the right way. But he doesn't do that. And it's incumbent. It's poor leadership. Well, the problem is when he gives that answer, and actually, I'll let him in his own words make this answer. Attempt number 2, guys, here on the AMRAD.
Are there more than that? What you're learning from that?
I can say that that is definitely a piece of the truth. Why it took a ton of time for and questioning in Congress for the director to get that point is what I'm trying to eliminate from the FBI. If Congress asks you a question under oath, whether or not there were sources in around January 6th at the Capitol, you as the director of the FBI need to know that and not deflect and give a DC answer. You have to be prepared for that. And that's the answer we're giving. That's the answer Chris Wray should have given.
So Director Patel is critiquing his predecessor at the FBI. He's saying he didn't have the answer. The question was, do you have the answer? Will you give us the answer? And his answer is, I should have the answer now as the director. And that's my answer. That's kind of a government speak response to a legitimate question. And, the information we kind of know. Brett Baier's asking about having informants or undercover assets at January 6th. And the Inspector General actually did fill us in a little bit. And we've got into that before, saying that there were 26 confidential human sources. And the FBI said that we didn't have any undercovers who were there, but that's very specific. We didn't have any undercover employees, people who actually went through the undercover program. And they're being very specific in that answer, so they don't have to talk about having plainclothes people there. But I want to talk about the answer he gave. I mean, if you have a husband and a wife, and the husband comes home and he smells a perfume from another woman, not his wife, and he's got lipstick on his collar, not his wife's lipstick, and she says, "Hey, have you been out with another woman?" And his response is, "Look, as a responsible husband, as a faithful husband, it's your job to come back with any sort of query from your wife about stepping out on her with an answer." And that's the answer I'm giving you. What is the difference between that and what Kash Patel did? He's doing full-on government speak when it comes to an issue that the American people intimately care about. And that is, was January 6th some sort of a put-up job? You have had the access. You're now in position. We are in July. Kash Patel's been the director since February 20th. The Trump administration's been in charge since January. We're now coming up on almost 6 months, and yet the transparency isn't there, because transparency seems to be this word, very much like the communists in this insufferable sort of period that we're in. The communists love to talk about democracy. Democracy is a code word for things we like. If you don't like things I like, then you just don't like democracy. Transparency, very much like the Kash Patel FBI, the Dan Bongino FBI, the Pam Bondi Department of Justice. Transparency is the coded word. They're not actually being transparent with the issues that we care about. They just say transparency is our dispute. We're here to provide transparency. If you want to talk about the Epstein list, well, I mean, just wait 6 to 8 months for that. But we're going to be transparent with you. Just trust us. 6 to 8 months from now, we're going to be transparent about matters that are sort of tangentially related. We talk about Epstein list? No, but we'll give you Operation Cross Country that's been rebranded as Operation Restore Justice. If you want to crack down on violent crime, well, we'll just go out there and tell you that the locals arrested a lot of these rioters around the country, and you're welcome for that. Now let's pivot away from my ex-girlfriend and Garrett's ex-girlfriend, and let's talk about some immigration stuff. This is reported in Axios, which is not a right-leaning source. I read it, so you don't have to. A judge blocked the Trump administration's from ending the Haitian immigrant protections early. I guess this doesn't apply to the universal injunctions that the Supreme Court stomped down. This is actually a specific matter. Now, Axios reports that it's 350,000 Haitian immigrants. I've seen it actually reported to be 520,000. So we're talking somewhere in the area of 1/3 to 500,000 people from Haiti who are currently enrolled in this TPS program. It allows migrants to remain in the United States if their home country is unsafe due to a natural disaster or a war. And the Trump administration has come in and said, you gotta go, because the Biden administration extended what was supposed to end in 2010 to be 2026. You're allowed to stay here. Now, Department of Homeland Security announced that benefits will instead end in September. So we're not going to sit around and wait until 2026. If you're from Haiti, you were here, natural disaster, earthquake, 2010, that's over. You have to go home. It's September is the cutoff date. But now a judge, his name is U.S. Judge Brian Hogan, an appointee of George W. Bush, sided with this group of Haitians who sued, and they said that we have to stay a little bit longer because we're at risk if we actually go home to our home country, and we need that extra amount of time. The Biden administration, when it threw open the borders and used every single possible mechanism to flood people who were not from our country into our country, whether or not they were some sort of temporary protective status, TPS, or just full on, no, you're an illegal alien, but we'll call you an immigrant and we'll just let you walk off of a military installation from the Southwest because we flew a bunch of Afghanis in here. Or you just walked across the Darien Gap and then surrendered, and we're going to give you a parole, or we'll give you a date in 5, 10, 15 years. You can talk to an immigration judge. It's in the millions of people. This is a specific instance of Haitians who said that they are at risk of going back to Haiti. But what is the risk? I mean, is there some sort of dictator who's out there chopping the hands off of people who disagree with him? Is there a natural disaster? No. Is there disease as written? No, they're economic refugees now at this point. Now, what makes Haiti unique in its threat? Because Haiti is this really weird country. It exists in Hispaniola. They share the country, or the island that they exist on, with the Dominican Republic. 2 independent countries existing on one island. So you would think the populations are probably relatively similar in their makeup of their ethnic demographics, maybe their religious worldview. So I went and looked it up. What are the differences between Haiti and the Dominican Republic? And there's this nice little GDP where you see how they're not killing it, but they're doing much better in the Dominican Republic compared to Haiti. The GDP, which means the gross domestic product, it's around 20,000 per person in the Dominican Republic. And then you just take one step over the line into Haiti and it's under 5,000. Now, each country has about 11 million people. The life expectancy in the Dominican Republic is 9 years longer than it is in Haiti. Unemployment rate, 5% in the Dominican. It's 15% in Haiti. Inflation, it's 3% in the Dominican. 26% in Haiti. And income is about 5 times more in the Dominican versus Haiti. So it's just a bleep hole country, as the current president liked to describe it as. That's not our job. That's not the American people's responsibility to accept 300, 400, 500,000 people into our country because we have it better than they do. If you want to go through a charitable route, if it pushes on your heart, then go to Haiti and help them. It's not my job. It's not Garrett's job. It's not the AMRAD pod audience's job to absorb these people who don't know what the Declaration of Independence was setting up. Does not know the foundational beliefs that we have in this country, the social compact, where we want our government to exist so that we can have a life and we can have liberty and we can pursue what it is that we want. And that's basically it. They have a bleep hole country in Haiti and they know nothing else. They believe in voodoo and cannibalism and apparently like eating cats and dogs. It is not compelled. There's no compulsion on us to absorb that into this country. And yet the last administration said that, yes, we do actually have to allow 500,000 of them to be plopped down wherever. And they typically were plopped down into these small communities that could be ignored in flyover country in areas that voted against Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. It was fundamentally evil. And your government did that to you. Is that something that you should suffer through? Is that saying, well, I wanted medium rare, but it is kind of medium well, but I don't want to spoil my beautiful wife's time here on date night. I think it's a little bit more than that. I think it's a little bit more than a couple of tax percentages on tea. But this is just one man's opinion. Let's go to the Blaze, where they're saying what the actual total was as it pertained to the Joe Biden administration. The results are in, tallying up Biden's immigration damage. And it comes from the Congressional Budget Office, which they always say is it's nonpartisan. It's an institution, though, and they're going to give the most rosy picture no matter what, because I think that the CBO leans, let's say, towards communism. According to the CBO, from 2021 through 2024, a net 10.3 million people immigrated to the United States. So take the total number in, minus the total number out, and we absorbed 10 million foreigners into this country. The portion of U.S. population that is foreign-born is now over 16%. That's a record. The last record was in 1890, so we're just continuing to set records. The net increase number of illegal aliens was north of 7 million. Now, I've had conversations with others who said that it's actually closer to 30 to 40 million, but the CBO says 7 million. So put another way, on the cusp of next year's 250th birthday, because this is 249 tomorrow, guys, 1 of every 6 people now living in the United States is foreign born. Not, my grandfather came here as an immigrant and set up shop and had my parents and now we're Americans. No, 1 in 6 currently living in this country are not from this country, and it's people like the sort that came from Haiti, the ones who believe in voodoo and eating dogs, people who traversed the Darien Gap because they were seeking some sort of economic relief, not because they wanted to buy into the document that we're going to be celebrating tomorrow. Now, along the lines, similarly, of the betrayals that we saw outside of an immigration context, the Joe Biden administration was all about the DEI. They're all about that equity, including depriving people medical care. Now, we're not going to talk about the coronavirus vaccine. We're actually going to talk about the concept of racial equity as it pertained to getting an organ transplant. This is a lawsuit from America First Legal. It's a lawsuit for a FOYA, Freedom of Information Act. They are suing HHS, CMS, HRSA, all these alphabet soup medical government agencies to uncover the Biden administration's plan to prioritize organ transplants based on skin color. Shortly after taking office, Biden signed Executive Order 13985. It was called Advancing Racial Equity and Support for Underserved Communities Through the Federal Government. They wanted to institutionalize DEI across the federal government. Later, the HRSA which is referenced in the title here, which is called the Health Resources Services Administration. Your government's too big, guys. They announced a modernization initiative that would strengthen equity in the organ donation and transplantation system. So, the FOYA is in regard to how far this went, but the going logic is that there was going to be pressure on medical providers, which take a lot of federal money. So those golden handcuffs exist. I mean, we're seeing now that Children's Hospital Los Angeles has stopped doing the tranny surgeries and providing the hormones because of the federal money attached to it. But under the Biden administration, the federal money was attached. They said, you're going to provide organs to people. If you need a kidney, yeah, but you're white. Sorry, it's going to go to somebody else. We're using melanin levels of skin. I thought we were beyond that at this point. I thought it was about the content of the character. I thought that there was this list set up for people who need kidneys, and whoever was at the top of the list, if there's a match, you've been waiting the longest, you're next in line. Well, we're just going to have to bypass you under the Biden administration because the person behind you is a little bit more tan for equity. Is that something that's sufferable? How many people in this audience have had organs impact them or somebody within their family? I know I have. Got somebody in my family who's on the list to get a kidney. Well, because they look like at real Steve Friend, because they're relatively pale, they're not going to be entitled to get that when it comes time for that. Now, there's this lawsuit here. We want to find out how bad it is. I'm less interested in finding out how bad it was. To me, the more sufferable thing here would be, all right, we absorbed it. It was evil. Who's going to prison? We have to do more than just have some sort of level of transparency, like Kash Patel and Dan Bongino like to talk about. I'm more interested in the accountability. I want to see the convictions. I want to see people who worked for the government who did these evil things going to prison for the rest of their lives, because the stakes have to be high if you're in a position of public trust and you use that. You use that position to personally enrich yourself or to push some sort of vile, vicious, evil communist agenda down on the American people. Well, you can bet your butt that that is an insufferable evil, and you have to be paying the price with maximum prejudice. Talk about forward aid. Now, this was from the U.S. Department of State, which has a Substack now. Man, this is an interesting time to live in. Making foreign aid great again. Now, alluded to the fact that the FBI is going to be going over to the Reagan building because USAID used to be there, and they're going to be occupying that space. Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, little Marco with his little hands, quote, beyond creating a globe-spanning NGO industrial complex at taxpayer expense, USAID has little to show since the end of the Cold War. Development objectives have rarely been met. Instability has often worsened, and anti-American sentiment has only grown. So we're shutting down, finally, USAID, much to the chagrin, and we talked about Joe Biden, but let's talk about some other prior people, because the Declaration of Independence did not pertain to simply one king. I mean, King George was the last guy in charge, but this sort of this long train of abuses, as it's referenced in the Declaration of Independence, led to these insufferable evils, and they were itemized in that list. It didn't just fall on one king's head. It fell on all of his predecessors. How about some of the predecessors that we have here, who are our presidents, but for all intents and purposes, the way that they wave around their executive authority now, we basically elect a dictator king every 4 years. Reporting from the AP. George W. Bush, Barack Obama, and singer Bono fault Trump's gutting of the USAID on the agency's last day. They got together for a cry session, but Bush and Obama didn't really want to do it. It was a virtual meeting, and they just did pre-recorded because they didn't want to be on there and actually have to associate with the plebeian swine who they're saying represented the best of us because they worked at USAID as some sort of CIA carve-out so that we could do nation building in diametrically opposition to what the American people want. But the AP reports the former presidents and Bono spoke with thousands in the USAID community Maybe they're taking time away from being on the unemployment line. They had a video conference, which was billed as a closed press event. They didn't want the press there to catch what they were saying, but there were some selective leaks. Quote, gutting USAID is a travesty, and it's a tragedy because it's some of the most important work happening anywhere in the world, said Barack Obama, former president of the United States, who couldn't wait to send our money overseas to his buddies to go do anything. It didn't really matter. It propped up all these NGOs. It did some a modicum of foreign policy where we tried to push forward what the CIA wanted to happen, but also, more importantly, from Obama's perspective and George W. Bush's perspective, took billions of dollars from the American people and routed to their friends. George W. Bush, who also spoke on a recorded message because he couldn't be there live. I mean, he's got really important things to do as a retired president with nothing to do. He was really upset because he sent billions of dollars over for AIDS and HIV into Africa. He claims, George W. Bush, to have saved 25 million lives because of that funding. But Bono, U2, because he, I don't know, we give him some modicum of foreign policy credit because he has a bleeding heart and he's a communist. He read a poem. Now, because it was closed and there was no media there, we didn't get any sort of access to the poem. But I was remembering that this is not a one-off for Bono. He's taken up lots of causes where, as a not American, he likes us to spend our money on things that are important to him. And one of those was they really want us to send millions and billions and trillions and gajillions of dollars over to Ukraine. So I found this over at Washington Post because democracy dies in darkness. This is Nancy Pelosi, who read a poem from Bono. So maybe the poem would be different material, but I imagine that he probably borrowed the inspiration for Ukraine and applied it to USAID because it's the next thing, very much like the online social media people are really concerned about the one big beautiful bill. And last week they were really worried about due process for illegal aliens. They were experts on that. And right before that, they were experts on tariff policy. And right before that, they were experts on Greenland. And right before that, they were experts on virology. That's the way it is for Bono as well. And that's where he gets his inspiration when he writes his poetry for the entertainment of the best among us. Talk about some insufferable evil. Here is Nancy Pelosi reading a Bono poem to our elected elite, the bourgeois.
Whether we're in Ireland or here, whatever it is, Bono has been a very Irish part of our lives. And he said this. He said, "Oh, St. Patrick, he drove out the snakes with his prayers, but that's not all it takes. For the smoke symbolizes an evil that arises and hides in your heart as it breaks. And the evil risen from friends, from the darkness that lives in some men, but in sorrow and fear, that's when saints can appear, to drive out those old snakes once again. And they struggle for us to be free from the psycho in this human family. Ireland's sorrow and pain is now the Ukraine, and St. Patrick's name is now Zelensky."
Oh, man. Would you eat green eggs and ham with a fox, in a box, under a tree, when you're at sea? I would not eat them, Sam I am. Thanks very much, Bono. Go back to singing your lame rock and roll songs that apparently lots of people like to watch. I'm not one of them. All right, I've got some other things to get to, some more insufferable evils here on the American Radicals podcast. But before we do, let's thank the underwriting sponsor of today's program, which is the M-Clip Company, m-clip.com, m-clip.com, where you go. These are really cool money clips, lifetime guarantee for these bad boys. You can get your initials monogrammed on them, even looking like they're leather or they're metallic. Get your favorite Major League Baseball team on them. These are real luxury goods. I will not break the bank because you can use the promo code SUSPENDABLE, SUSPENDABLE, and you can also get our logo and emblem. This is all things across the board. Use the promo code SUSPENDABLE at m-clip.com. 10% off these money clips, so you can actually have some money to keep in your money clip. Check them out, guys, at m-clip.com. And remember, promo code is suspendable. I was going to talk about some more like foreign aid stuff. That's really boring. And we're going into July 4th, and I want to see stuff explode, and it's going to be fun. Let's do a little bit of a laugh. Almost like a mid-show palate cleanse, but sort of in line and keeping with, the theme of the day is this like insufferable evil. Let's just, how about this like some insufferable people doing insufferable things? Actually, it's show business for ugly people, show business for ugly, retarded people, untalented people. And I found the video, Hank Johnson, Congressman. We just saw Nancy Pelosi there with her dentures clacking away. How about Hank Johnson, the musical stylings of a Georgia congressman who took it upon himself to buy a new guitar. Hopefully he wasn't using his campaign funds. And he wanted to share a song. We heard the poem from Bono. Now let's hear a song from Hank Johnson as this mid-show palate cleanse here on the American Radicals podcast.
Hey, Trump, where you going with that gun in your hand? Hey, Trump, where you going with that gun in your hand? I'm going down the street and shoot down democracy. You know I want to be a king someday.
The musical stylings of Elvis Presley, y'all. Sorry, it's Hank Johnson. And that's an elected official talking about insufferable evils. As a side note, Hank Johnson won 76% of the vote in his last election, 2024. And he's been in office since 2007. So coming up on 2 full decades at the helm as one of the duly elected representatives from the great state of Georgia, home to the M-Clip company, by the way. And I play that just to highlight how we have the worst, most untalented, retarded people. And then also because they'd had to do the mid-show sort of palate cleanse. And it also gives me an opportunity to play a classic Hank Johnson who thinks that the island of Guam might tip over.
Part of the island. And I don't know how many square miles that is. Do you happen to know?
I don't have that figure with me, sir. I can certainly supply it to you if you'd like.
Yeah, my fear is that the whole island will become so overly populated that it will tip over and capsize.
We don't anticipate that.
That admiral is struggling mightily to keep a straight face. Well, I mean, I guess the upside is if Guam were to tip over and capsize, as Hank Johnson alluded to, perhaps we could take them and move them over to Haiti, right? And they could help bring the GDP up there. And I didn't note it, but at the time in the background, Hank Johnson, you noticed the wall behind him had keep TPS, temporary protective status. He's all in to make sure we have lots of Haitians in the country. All right, palate cleanse aside, and let's talk about let's nerd out a little bit. And we allude to this reference in the Declaration of Independence that people will suffer while things are sufferable. People are really suffering economically right now. And I found a piece over at the Mises Institute that they're libertarian leaning in economically. And I thought it made a really good point, not just what the government's done, but also what people have allowed to happen because they just haven't been able to get interested, to get informed, and they will come to the worst conclusions for themselves to get the worst outcomes. And the people that are in positions of power know it. So they don't hesitate to continue pushing us to some sort of economic death spiral that we're in. This piece is from the Mises Institute. Silver price shows what government has done to our money. So silver has actually been going up quite a bit, which it's not the gold standard what we're on, and you can go buy silver from some sort of bullion company and get a fair amount of it. But silver's rally has made it worth the effort to sift through coin jars, because if you find old quarters, any coins that were minted before 1965, they actually contain real silver in them. So if you got a quarter that's from 1964, you can sell it, melt it down and get $6.50 out of it. So 25-cent coin is actually worth in metal $6.50, an enormous upgrade. So no one seems concerned about the constant devaluation of our dollar. They blame high prices on whoever's the president or corporate greed. The idea is that the problem is the constant creation of more money escapes them. So people don't really associate inflation with the reality that our government prints money. So when you have more money, each individual piece of money, like that 25-cent piece, is worth less. It's not actually worth the coinage, the metal that it's printed on. People call inflation is not what we think of inflation, what most people think of inflation. It's not actually what inflation is. Inflation is increasing the number of dollars and cents that are actually in circulation. But people think like, oh, prices are going up. I mean, they're related, but conceptually, they're actually different. And as a result of that, people are taking their silver and they're bringing it to bullion distributors, people who buy and sell estate jewelry, that sort of thing. And they're selling their gold and selling their silver because they're saying, hey, look, the price of this quarter, it was 25 cents if I go to the store and try to make a purchase out of it, but the metal in it is actually worth $6.50. So I'll go to the distributor and he'll give me $6.50. Well, that makes sense to you. And you just go on about your business, as opposed to realizing that that $6.50 is going to be devalued tomorrow and the next day and the next day over it. So you really haven't corrected the problem. You feel like you made money on it, but you haven't. You're still holding dollars that are not worth the paper they're printed on. You're still holding coinage that's not worth the metal that it's printed on. And that's a result of our government sending billions of dollars to Ukraine, borrowing on the backs of you and your kids and your grandkids, and in order so they can take that money and import a bunch of Haitians who don't buy into our system of government, or they're going to go build themselves a brand new headquarters somewhere. If they can't do that, well, they'll just go to a state-of-the-art building that's 3 blocks away, right? Now, outside of a federal context, I alluded to this a week ago, and I want to make sure that I hit it because it connects not just the expenditures that are out there and the pressure, the downward pressure that we're getting from our government on that, but also the pressure on the climate paganism and how they've connected it to this cottage industry of electric vehicles, which I am not in favor of. As much as people say that, oh, that Tesla, it's so cool, man, you got to get a Cybertruck. You are plugging that thing up to the 3 holes in the wall. That is not pixie dust that is powering it. It's electricity being generated at a coal-fired plant. So for all the talk about you have an electric vehicle, you have a coal car. So let's just call a spade a spade. You just haven't done that second level of thinking. And this is a piece over at Blaze where they're talking about the real cost of the electric vehicle agenda. $8 gas, by the way, in California. Maybe some of the California listeners over on the American Radicals podcast can testify to that truth there. I can't imagine absorbing that into your budget. But starting this past week, July 1st, California drivers could be paying 65 cents more per gallon, pushing gas prices to $8 by next year. So last year in November, California Air Resources Board, which is called CARBs. I thought you need to be low carb now, but in California, you can have all the carbs. It's an unelected group appointed by Governor American Cycle, Gavin Newsom. It voted to update the state's low carbon fuel standard. The new rules penalize gasoline and diesel producers and reward low carbon fuel options like electric vehicles. Even though they're plugging into the wall from coal, they're getting a benefit from the state of California, from this unelected board of bureaucrats. So this unelected board called CARB, the California Air Resources Board, their goal is to cut carbon intensity of transportation fuels by 30% by 2030 and 90% by 2045. They basically want to move the entire state of California into electric vehicles only to save the planet. Now, people can allude to, hey, that's California. That doesn't affect me. It's not going to do anything. Those communists, like I say, in New York City, they can do whatever they want. Spoiler, we'll get to New York City in a minute. But this does actually have impacts nationwide. This is the leverage point that the state of California have. Because California, as much as they want to be crazy, they have access to a lot of coastline, meaning there are lots of very strategic ports that are in the state of California, which I did a little bit of research on. Legislative Analyst's Office. And this is an overview of the ports in California. And how does this relate to electric vehicles? How does this relate to really expensive gas? And how does it relate to everybody else who doesn't live on the left coast? Well, California has a total of 12 ports. 11 of these are publicly owned, government owned. These ports process about 40% of all containerized imports, 4 in 10 containers that come to this country, and 30% of all exports, things going out of the United States, come through California. Now, if there is a pressure coming from these unelected bureaucrat boards, courtesy of American psycho Gavin Newsom, what are the odds that the shipping, the actual long-haul truckers, they're going to have to transition to electric vehicles? They're, after all, being punished. The fuel prices are going to be so high that it is not going to be worth it to them. They're going to transition to an electric fleet. It's not going to make sense for them, therefore, because 40%, I mean, you're getting close to a majority of the shipping that happens, is going to be coming from California. It's not going to economically make sense to those trucking companies to maintain 2 fleets, a diesel fleet and an electric fleet. Ergo, they will say, in order to accommodate California, we will transition our entire trucking fleet to electric, which is very expensive. And those costs, do you think are going to be absorbed by the shipping companies? Do you think they're just out of the kindness of their heart going to say, hey, look, California, kind of crazy. I guess we're just going to have to eat into our profit margin, which is already small and already in an economy where quarters that were produced in 1964 are actually worth $6.50 in inflated dollars because the inflated dollar has so gone out of control. We can't afford to do it. We will transition to electric. And because of California, there will be a nationwide transition to electric vehicles in order to do the shipping, which will cause shipping costs to explode across the country. So it really does have an impact on you as an American, whether or not you live in the Communist Republic of California. Now, is that something that you're willing to absorb? Is that something you're willing to suffer through? Higher costs of every staple that you have because California decided to be crazy climate pagans? I think that's a little bit more important than the import of tea, which the British government said, can you kick in a couple extra cents, a couple extra percentage points on the tax? It's going to be way more than that because the shipping company is using an electric 18-wheeler. Now, away from this one entirely, I want to talk about some judges, some out-of-control judges who are siding with people who assault those who pray outside of baby kill mills. This is a story out of Baltimore, where we had the Star-Spangled Banner for the Battle of Baltimore actually originate, the bombs bursting in the air. That was in the Baltimore harbor. And here's a video of an assault that happened, and just have an experiment here, an experiment in criminal justice. Imagine for a moment that you are on a jury and you want to be presented with evidence, and the state has come before you and said that this individual committed an assault. And here's our evidence. We don't have to take any eyewitnesses. We're going to present those. So we don't have to take just the medical reports. I mean, we're going to present those. You don't have to hear the victims, and we'll present those. But we actually have a video of what happened, so you can believe us or you can believe your lying eyes as to what happened at 300 North Howard Street outside of a Planned Parenthood.
Baltimore Police Department's Central District detectives need your help identifying a suspect involved in an assault that occurred on May 26, 2023, around 10:20 in the morning in the 300 block of North Howard Street. Surveillance video shows the suspect, a white male with a beard, approaching a group outside the Planned Parenthood building. After a heated conversation, the suspect tackles one of the victims into the ground. Another victim, who came to help, is then assaulted by the suspect. Anyone with information about the incident or the suspect is asked to call Central District Detectives at 410-396-2411.
All right. Well, that looks pretty cut and dried. Looks like that guy attacked somebody who was praying outside, and then when somebody came to help him, attacked the second guy. Well, reporting from Catholic Vote on the details here, because a judge acquitted that man of the second attack. Here are the details. Patrick Bryce is our bad guy. He tackled the first guy into that concrete flower plot, and that guy's name is Dick Schaefer. Both these guys are like in their 70s or 80s, by the way. This young guy attacked them both. And then the second individual who he beat down is named Mark Crosby. The second guy, Mark Crosby, he suffered a fractured orbital bone, a ruptured eye globe, and permanent damage that leaves his pupil dilated and intolerant to light. Physicians say the injuries are permanent disability. Baltimore Circuit Judge Yvette M. Bryant acquitted the 28-year-old Bryce of first-degree assault. Now, Bryce was actually convicted by a jury in February of 2 counts of second-degree assault and 2 counts of reckless endangerment, but the jury could not actually reach a verdict on the first-degree assault on the second guy, Mark Crosby, and they actually acquitted him on the first-degree assault on the first guy, Dick Schaefer. The judge here viewed that evidence and said that the second guy coming to the aid might have provoked our bad guy. And as a result of that, first-degree assault was not appropriate. He gets a walk. And with the second-degree offenses, I mean, they are felonious, depending on what his criminal history is going to be. And in light of the fact that it's in Baltimore and they have overcrowding going on in their state penitentiaries, he's probably going to be out not a certain amount of time. They'll cut his time down to 50%, and it'll probably be a matter of months before he's out after committing those brutal assaults and rendering the victims there with permanent bodily injury. But because the judge is a dyed-in-the-wool communist who identified a choke point, and said, I know it's on video. I know what he did there was an assault, but he was fighting for the cause. So I'm going to use my position of authority. I'm going to use this spot that I have to make sure that I get that vile street animal the softest possible sentence so that he can go back out and attack more people outside of the baby kill mills, because after all, that's what's more important. I'm an elite communist. My hands are going to look like they don't have blood on them. He'll have blood on his, but he can go out and do that. And every single time I'll run protection for him so that he won't turn against me, because he knows that he will be able to engage in those activities and he'll be protected and not have to have any real sort of modicum of justice, no actual consequences for what's going on. It's just yet another one of these insufferable evils that are being allowed to happen. And that's an elected position, by the way, in Baltimore City, Maryland. And the prosecutors kind of threw up their hands and at one point made a remark like, what else do you expect in Baltimore City other than judges letting street animals out after they have engaged in violence against citizens who were doing what the First Amendment, part of that pesky Bill of Rights, which sort of sets the guardrails for the social compact, which we established with the Declaration of Independence. Engaging in that, though, as long as you're going against what the communists want, it's fair game on your head. They will allow violence to transpire against you. Now, I keep talking about New York, and I keep talking about how I don't want to talk about New York, but I got a couple stories here, and I want to touch on them because of the insufferable evils, but also because I have a funny one as well. And I want to make sure that we go into the holiday weekend here with a nice laugh. But before we do, you got to eat your peas, guys. So there's been a lot of talk about this crazy communist who is running for mayor in New York City. And I don't really care about it that much, but he is proposing government-run grocery stores, which sounds like one of the worst possible ideas. I mean, do you want the DMV to manage your food. But because he's a communist and because he's retarded, he just seized on numbers that he saw and didn't actually know that he didn't have the money that was yours to spend. That money's not actually in the coffer. So the principle was, I'm going to take your money and spend it how I want, but the money isn't actually there. I'll give you the details in a second, but here is this crazy Zohan Mamdani talking about how he wants government-run grocery stores. Give this one a play.
Out of control. The cost of eggs and milk has skyrocketed. Some stores are even using dynamic pricing, jacking up the cost over the course of a day depending on what they can get away with. It doesn't need to be this way. I'm Zohan Mamdani, and as mayor, I will create a network of city-owned grocery stores. It's like a public option for produce. We will redirect city funds from corporate supermarkets to city-owned grocery stores, whose mission is lower prices, not price gouging. These stores will operate without a profit motive or having to pay property taxes or rent, and will pass on those savings to you.
So he's right away going to interrupt the capitalist system. Like, this won't work. I mean, just fundamentally, like, government-run supermarkets are going to suck. The food quality is going to be awful because when have you gone to a DMV and been like, well, that was fantastic? But because, as he alludes to there, there's not a profit motive. What about the private-run grocery stores? You're going to run them out of business, which would mean that there's not as many grocery stores, which would mean you would actually exacerbate the problem of food shortages for people. But this communist doesn't do that level of calculation. He's doing the running for student government thing where they say, hey, if you elect me student body president here as the 5th grader, I'm going to tell all the teachers in school that there's no more homework. And by the way, we're going to have free soda machines. It's just not doable. But it's definitely not doable in New York because the money he alludes to, where he's talking about opening these up, doesn't exist. And this was reported a bunch of different places. I saw it in the New York Post, and it's not worth bringing it up. But he believes this guy that there's like $140 million available to spend on his government-run grocery stores. And it's because he read the city website incorrectly. So it's based on the Food Retail Expansion to Support Health. It's called FRESH. And basically a bunch of tax breaks and regulation cuts and that sort of thing that they gave to these privately owned grocery stores. Because they said, hey, look, we have these Michelle Obama food deserts where these people who live in the inner city, they can't get healthy food. That's why they eat the Doritos and drink the beer, and they're all have type 2 diabetes because, I don't know, racism or something. But in order to incentivize you to open your grocery store in these bad areas where you totally are not going to get robbed, we're going to give you some tax breaks. And some of the private grocers took them up on that. So they got some tax breaks, and it wound up costing like the city a couple of $1 million a year in. When I say cost them, it means that they didn't bring in as much tax revenue as they normally do because they gave tax cuts. So the city was out a few $1 million. That's all. So where does the 140 million come in? Well, apparently these private grocery stores, because they came in and wanted to take advantage of these tax breaks, they have now reinvested $140 million into the communities because they want to actually be a staple in the communities. They want to be a going concern going forward. And collectively, all of these private grocery stores have reinvested $140 million into the community. And that's per the private grocery stores, that's per the government website, and who knows how honest they're being on it, but let's say they are. And this communist said, oh, they reinvested that into the community. I'm going to take that money, which doesn't exist, and build some publicly owned DMV-run grocery stores in New York City. So enjoy that, New York City. And then also enjoy all the illegals who are rolling around with driver's licenses, which is the subject of another story in New York City outside of the mayoral politics, reported from The Blaze. New York City last. Alleged scheme gave driver's licenses to Chinese illegal aliens, even if they can't drive. What the heck is going on? So according to authorities, there was this company called T&E Driving School in Queens. And it went on social media and identified residents who didn't speak English. They spoke Fujianese. And the clients were mostly from Chinese, non-citizens, illegal aliens. They would then pay between $1,000 and $2,000 in order to get a driver's license and basically staff at this company, which publicly was saying, hey, look, we're going to help you study for your driver's exam. They would just take the test for them. The scandal was apparently uncovered after an NYPD received a tip, and they had a sting operation, and they used an undercover officer who went in there and spoke the language and was able to get a driver's license without even taking a road test. So they're going to willingly put people on the roads who don't speak the language, obviously can't read the signage, have never driven. But the more meta issue, and this is sort of related to what California is doing with its fuel consumption stuff, where they're going to force shipping companies into electric vehicles, and that will cause prices to go up around the country because those companies can't afford to maintain a diesel fleet and an electric fleet. What do you want to bet that those driver's licenses are going to find their ways into the Midwest? Well, I have a New York driver's license. I don't speak English, and this big city life wasn't good for me. I just went to go to work out here, do a manual labor job under the table, and I'm gonna now vote in the next election. And how much you want to bet that it's not by the dozens or even the hundreds? It's going to be by the thousands of these fraudulent New York driver's licenses that exist. And what sort of level of accountability do we have? I mean, does the DMV in New York City maintain records of people who don't speak English saying like, I went to this school and got trained? No, it's a private company. Do you think this private company, which is engaging in a fraud, in a scheme to collect thousands of dollars from illegal aliens, do you think they kept copious records of the people that came in so we'll be able to track them down as one, illegal aliens, and two, people who have fake driver's licenses? Or are they just somewhere in the interior of the country going ahead and getting a job? So now they have ID, driving without any knowledge of how to use a motor vehicle in the United States and obey our traffic laws, and possibly voting in the next election, which will impact not just mayoral politics in New York City, but nationwide politics. Is that something you're willing to suffer through? Is that something you're willing to just kind of nod and go along with and say, I don't want to make a stink over this. I don't want to ruin date night over a steak that's slightly overcooked. I'll just chew on through it. I think that's a fairly alarming concern. I think it's something that we should be unwilling to suffer. People who were better than you and me and everybody didn't take anything close to this level. And yet, here we are, sitting complacent, sitting comfortable, enjoying the conveniences and the trappings that individuals hundreds of years ago were willing to lay it all on the line so that they didn't have to pay a few extra cents for tea. People that parked their entire family in a covered wagon and traversed the continent of the United States of America where they didn't know what they were going to encounter, looked around and saw their 7, 8, 9 children and said, a couple of you are probably going to die of scurvy, but it's worth it because of freedom. People who even before and predated this country put their entire family on the Mayflower in the hopes that they might hit a continent out there that they didn't really know where it was. And when they got there, there wasn't going to be a Holiday Inn Express. They had to disembark from a ship and just survive the elements, hopefully plant a farm, hopefully go and find some game in the interior, hopefully not encounter any sort of adversarial forces who would scalp them for intruding on their territory. Those people wouldn't be willing to suffer these insufferables. And yet here we are. We need to reorient our thinking. Now I've got one more story that's sort of a palate cleanse and sort of funny, and it's dunking on New York. And then I actually do have a palate cleanse that we can get to, which is not quite as funny. But so I wanted to make sure that we got everything and also kept with a Declaration of Independence type of theme today. So saw this over at Vice, and it made me laugh. It made me think of toilet humor. It made me think of my dad. It made me think of my kids, because this just gets me in the right spot. From Vice: people won't stop pooping in New York City's public pools. I wouldn't be willing to suffer this. Get out of New York City. Go somewhere good. Unless you're a communist, then stay there. But if you're a common sense person, you can come down to Florida if you want, as long as you don't live near me and plug up the roads, because traffic's already bad enough. But from Vice: New York City's public pools were inadvertently turned into a public toilet on 203 separate occasions last year, as nearly every pool in the city was pooped in. It forced closures and cutting swim hours. Thanks to a Freedom of Information request. Can you imagine putting in a FOIA request for this matter? They did at Vice. We now know that 50 of the 52 public pools, 44 had to be shut down at least one time. And also, they have different levels of contamination, like it's DEFCON. Like level 1 would be a solid poop, and level 2 would be Hershey squirts. All told, New Yorkers lost more than 600 hours of pool time because people couldn't hold it in and make it to the nearby restroom. Again, city government going through that rigmarole, as well as ranking it. I don't think that that's something I'd want to suffer through, and I certainly wouldn't want to suffer through in the hot summer months, not being able to enjoy the outdoor weather. And it reminded me of got to go with the classic, guys. This is Caddyshack. How do they know that it was a level 1? I mean, did they do a taste test? Don't touch it!
Balding, no!
And of course, we go to Bill Murray later on, and he gives it a taste because it is, after all, just a Baby Ruth candy bar. All right. I do have a palate cleanse. It is related to Declaration of Independence, just the significance, the austere nature of the day. Tomorrow, I will be engaging in my tradition of reading the Declaration to the kiddos to make sure that they have an appreciation for the freedoms that we have, the conveniences that we have, the comforts that we have are all derivative of the guys who are willing to lay it on the line. But before we do, Garrett's not here. I will do my utmost best to give you a biblical worldview, and also in keeping with the theme of July 4th. This comes from 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 16. Live as people who are free, not using your freedom as a cover-up for evil, but living as servants of God. Just do good, guys. That's really the takeaway today. Enjoy the freedom, enjoy the day, but also just take a moment to realize that with great power comes great responsibility. There's people in Haiti and all across the globe who don't have the freedoms and the fruits of the freedoms and liberties that we have. So we should take that as not just a reason to veg out and relax, which you should do. Enjoy the burgers, enjoy the hot dogs, enjoy the explosives. But you should also take it upon yourself as a responsible member of our society, as the next generation in this great experiment in freedom and liberty, to say, look, some of the things that are going on out there are just not sufferable, and I'm not going to let them pass. No more. I'm going to step up. I'm going to do what is necessary. I'm going to do America. Do your little part. If everybody does a little part, you don't have to do it yourself. You might have 10 things you're worried about, and this is where the faith component comes in. You have 10 things you're really worried about. For every minute that you spend on one, the other ones are not getting done. So devote what you can to that one thing. And you have to have faith that somebody else within your network, somebody else within the American Radicals podcast, their number one issue is your number 2. And another person out there, their number 1 is your number 3. If you all do your part, you paint your section of the fence, Tom Sawyer style, the entire fence will get painted, and we can actually aspire to a great country that prioritizes freedom, liberty, and just having all a good time, and do that in honor of the guys who are the subject of today's palate cleanse, the ones who really put it on the line, the authors of that great document that I will be reading later on tomorrow to the kiddos, the Declaration of Independence, the story behind America's freedom.
56 men risked everything they owned to sign a document that would change the world forever. The Declaration of Independence wasn't just a piece of paper. It was a revolutionary thunderbolt that transformed 13 British colonies into a radical new nation. On July 4th, 1776, the Continental Congress adopted a bold proclamation drafted primarily by Thomas Jefferson, declaring complete separation from Great Britain's tyrannical rule. Most signers knew this act was considered high treason, punishable by death. Each signature represented an extraordinary act of courage. These men, merchants, lawyers, landowners, were committing what the British would view as a treasonous rebellion. They pledged their lives, fortunes, and sacred honor to a dangerous proposition: that all men are created equal and possess unalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. This single document would spark a revolution that would inspire democratic movements worldwide for centuries to come.
Well said. Hope you guys have a great and safe July 4th weekend. We will be enjoying and partaking in it as well here on the AMRAD pod. So no show Saturday. And we'll be back, though, regular fare, hopefully GOB actual with me as a co-host on Tuesday, 10:30 Eastern time. Till then, guys, have a great 4th of July weekend.
You've been listening to the Voice of the Suspendables on the American Radicals podcast. Follow us on rumble.com/amradpod.